PC gaming is a mess. It has fallen from its graces of 10 years ago when you just install all your games. If you're just staying the Steam client, it's actually not too bad. I will say I enjoy Steam a lot better than pretty much any other PC gaming experience, which we'll get into in a second. But also I wanted to talk about operating systems because you'll see I'm in Linux right here with Elden Ring. And I wanted to show kind of what the future could hold for us on PC gaming, because it's been kind of a dark past couple years, I'd say. Probably 5 years ago, it's just slid downhill. And if we look at our browser right here, desktop share has declined a lot for Windows. We saw a massive decline from the mid 90s of Windows from 2010 all the way to about 75% today, which is, a good 25%. And if you look before the Windows 11 drop, it was even lower for old Windows. And I've been gaming mostly in Windows. And, it's one of the things over on Twitch, I get asked all the time, hey, are you in Windows or are you on Linux? Because I make a lot of Linux videos. And I usually am in Windows when it comes to gaming, but it's just infuriated me because of all the shenanigans it pulls between Edge browser and other aspects of Windows that Microsoft just wants to drive people away, I think. And I think right here is what the future of Windows is. File Explorer ads were unintentionally published externally, is what they said. And yeah, they literally thought it was a good idea. They had a set of programmers actually program ads into the File Explorer of Windows. That's what the future looks like. So with that in mind, I think we need to really revisit other operating systems. And I'm going to look at Chrome OS. I'm going to look at Mac. I'm going to look at Linux. And Linux is probably, if you're a gamer, I think is pretty much the only alternative. Because when it comes to Chrome and Mac, they're too closed off. They don't have the versatility that Linux provides to really do it. But I don't want to BS anybody. I want to tell you straight up, here are the issues with it. And then let's try and play a game on Linux and then try and play it on Windows. And let's just see what the differences are now that we know. First off, let's talk about launchers. Why is PC gaming a mess? Everything has a damn launcher. League of Legends has a launcher of a launcher. It has your Riot client that launches. It kind of works with Windows, but then, you go to launch League of Legends and it's even worse. A lot of times it won't even launch. So let's see here. We'll give it a try. I don't really hold much hope for this, as sometimes it takes 2-3 minutes on Linux to launch into League of Legends, and sometimes it just won't work. But this is just kind of a limitation of Linux. When you get into these external launchers, it's very hit and miss, and a lot of times your game of choice just simply won't play on Linux. But having said that, there are companies that do and are friendly of Linux, Valve being the chief one among them. And if we come over to here, you can see a lot of these things they've done making all these games compatible. Some people have even said they play better on Linux than Windows. Now, I want to dispel that myth right out of the gate. The chances of it playing better on Linux than Windows are slim. And it's going to be a very, very select number of games. But let me outline the ones that do work better on Linux compared to Windows. 10-year plus games typically will be better on Linux than Windows counterparts, because Windows changed a whole bunch and Linux is able to basically lock these games in time and play them how they're meant to be played. One game in particular, Fallout 3, is a good example of this. It will play far better on Linux than Windows, and it's a good one. Some people have said Elden Ring. So with that, it's a new game. Let's do an apples to apples comparison and actually try it out right now. And it did not launch, so let's go ahead and relaunch. Let's see it. Third time's the charm. No, still didn't work. So let's try it again. Let's first try and remove everything from our launch options, go to compatibility. Let's just not force everything. This is the base state before doing anything. I was tinkering a little bit and I might have messed this up. Let's see if any of my tinkering may have messed up what we have going on. Yeah, it looks like that was it. Now this game is a little interesting because it does have an enforced 60 frame cap. So that's really important to know. Let's go to System. Come on over to here. You can kind of see all the settings we're using. Everything's on a high, 1440p. Let's play this stock. Now, I could optimize this. I made a Windows optimization video kind of showing how it played on Windows with high and everything in. Now I want to try it on Linux and see what this looks like. I was in the intro area and I was getting between the mid 30s to the mid 40s. So let's go to the intro area and see what we're getting. Oh, I can already tell this is not great, but sometimes it evens out. So let's move to the intro area and see what that looks like. Oh, this is I can tell already not great. So here we go. Here's the intro area. On Windows, we were getting mid 30s to mid 40s in this area right here. On Linux, we're getting around 20 FPS. Not great, but let's just make some of the same changes I made over there and see if it gets up to that 60 FPS number. That'd probably be the magic number to go to. And I usually change, let's say, this to off. Change these things to off. Let's go there. And change this to that. Keep the settings. So we're taking it down from the 1440p to 1080p. Also changing these. These are pretty much the best settings I found for this specific setup. This made it about 60 frames or really close to it on Windows. Let's see what it looks like on Linux. Still not a great showing here. And what I'm probably going to do is change the shader compiler to like a RAD-V instead of, or an ACO instead of LLVM, which is just how it translates DirectX games in from the Windows counterpart to so Linux can read it. Now this is only a configuration change for AMD chips. If you're an NVIDIA, this will not work. At least not yet. And if you ever want to see any tweaks or anything, I made an entire Ultimate Linux Gaming Guide on my website where it kind of has a bunch of copy and paste where you can change things up to see how that performs compared to like a stock version. And usually ACO, you see a little bump, but not much. But I want to try it anyways. We're just going to add that. And then we'll source etc environment so we don't have to reboot our computer. And we'll quit out of this. Try playing Elden Ring again. And we're right back to that 20 or so FPS. Which is a little bit weird. Let's switch that back to a 1440p. Keep those settings. And you can see it almost becomes smoother than the 720 counterpart. So some shenanigans are going on. All right, and we're back in. This one's the low setting. And it does seem much more playable, much more responsive. But again, I mean, it looks like garbage with all the popping and the shadows. It looks so silly. But I'd say this is probably a good 50% decrease in performance over the Windows counterpart. I've made various videos in Windows showcasing specifically this game if you want to see it at 60 FPS and the changes I made. But the Linux counterpart, I would say, is pretty awful, at least in this configuration on my Linux. Now, just to show you that I do have games that work on here, let's pull up Path of Exile. I've done a lot of videos showcasing it. I know it'll run at a good 60 FPS and above. So let's pull that up and see if we have any stuttering. Now, this game has always been traditionally a little bit dicey. I will say this already feels a lot better, but let's see what we get in options. Let's try to switch this to Vulkan I know Vulkan's going to be a lot better than DirectX, so that's something I definitely want to see. And I think we'll leave the rest of this on default settings, just to kind of see what kind of FPS we're getting. It shows in the hundreds, which is pretty good. It's more the frame rates that I'm more worried about on this game, which in the past I have had issues with. So I did a video on this specific game about 2 years ago, and I wanted to see how far this came. And I will say it's come a long ways from the last video I made from it. Right now, that is looking very good. Let's just run to a more populated spot. It's very slick. This game used to run like crap, but ever since they've redone it with Vulkan, instead of just, it used to be DirectX only, it actually was DirectX 9 and DirectX 11 back when I did it. So we actually got to see it just kind of sit here, and I mean, look at that. Vulkan's at a solid 160 or so. And if we look at, if we go to game and do the exact same thing with DirectX, and you'll start to see a big difference. Obviously, we already did with some of the DirectX in the beginning. But if we switch this to DirectX 11, save that. Let's see what we're getting for frames now. And you can kind of see with DirectX, you see how it's, oh man, it just turned to garbage. It's, I think, building something in the background there. You got all that stuttering, where the native Vulkan one, oh, it's just so much better. And this is like a perfect game to test on, where you can see the DirectX compared to Vulkan, and it just makes all the difference in the world. So I guess it shouldn't be that surprising, but it is. It's a massive difference between the Vulkan and DirectX, where this just looks better, it's smooth, plays really good, and a good example of games made for DirectX, games made with Vulkan in mind. And this is kind of how a lot of Linux gaming is, but also it depends on modern DirectX. Now, Cyberpunk here does show that it is a DirectX 12 exclusive, and I have run it on this system, and it does get some decent ones in the past, which I've done videos on. I think I'm going to keep exploring this. When it comes to Linux, not everybody's experience is the same. Some changes need to happen, and this is kind of my first run through coming back to Linux. I wanted to just hit record so then you can get a feeling for what it might be like for you. Also, kind of keep after this. I want to try different configurations, different optimizations, update my ultimate Linux gaming guide, and get back into it, because I'm really sick of Windows, and I know Linux, when it comes to gaming, is the closest to moving a lot of my library over. And what are your experiences with Linux gaming? Because I see so many people go, oh, it just works. And it may for them, but a lot of times it doesn't for me in certain games. If I was just playing Path of Exile on Vulkan, I'd be like, this is the perfect experience. Smooth, 150 FPS everywhere. Fantastic experience. If I was playing Elden Ring, I'd be like, dude, this is like a 50% performance head, just a cut. I can't play like this. I got to go back to Windows. If I was playing League of Legends, well, I wouldn't probably be playing on Linux, because it's really hard to get that damn thing to launch. And that's kind of where I'm at. And my step back, this is day one back on Linux gaming, where I just kind of took some time off, and it's come a little ways, but at the same time, I'm starting to remember some downsides to it. But I still have fun tinkering, and to me, I think the future looks a lot brighter on Linux than it does on Windows, and getting a more cohesive gaming experience, getting back into the PC, would be fantastic. I just think it's a giant mess right now between PC, whether it's Windows, Linux. Mac, do you even game on Mac? I mean, I guess you could play some arcade games through the store or something, but same with Chrome OS. So really, it's only Windows and Linux we're talking about here. But at the same time, man, I mean, there's a long road ahead of us. And I think to fix a lot of these things, Linux is our best hope. And it's just not a very good spot right now with how things are. I'm really looking forward to SteamOS 3 launch and all the optimizations that went into it. I'm going to try another fork made by Luke Short, which he did like a Wines app, which is using the SteamOS image, and see what all Steam's done on the background, because I have a feeling Steam's doing a lot more in optimization to how the Linux install is set up than we know. And we can take those optimizations whenever they publish them and bring them into our regular Linux distros, or just install SteamOS. Either way, I'm all for it. I wanted to just give an honest, straight up opinion today and just say, hey, this is what it looks like day one of coming back in a Linux install that's not really well optimized yet. Something that I'm working on, and see where we're at. So let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in the next one.